Hey everyone, welcome to Games in Bullets, where I give you 5 quick takes on the games I play. Today, we're diving into Baldur's Gate 3, the game that swept various Game of the Year awards in 2023. As a long-time JRPG player who struggled to get into CRPGs in the past, this video will draw parallels between the two subgenres. I hope to explain why Baldur's Gate 3 resonated with me, unlike other games, including the previous 2 Baldur's Gate and the 2 Divinity Original Sin. Let's jump into the 5 key aspects that define my experience with this game. First up, cinematics and presentation. I honestly never thought I cared much about these aspects in video games, considering them superficial with limited impact on overall enjoyment. However, Baldur's Gate 3 proved me wrong. While I don't typically shy away from dialogue-heavy games, a quick shout-out to all Trials fans, I find CRPGs often lean too much on the text-heavy gameplay side of things. This isn't just due to lengthy dialogues and detailed menus, but also because of the genre's traditional reliance on text-based narration to convey reactions and emotions from characters that are typically seen from a distance on a top-down view. Baldur's Gate 3, however, represents a paradigm shift with its enhanced cinematic presentation. Its high-quality cinematics have significantly reduced the genre's traditional reliance on text-based narration, making the game more approachable for players who might find extensive reading cumbersome. This shift offers a more dynamic and immediate storytelling experience. Now I'm not sure why this hasn't really worked for me, while this has. To be fair, the approach taken by Baldur's Gate 3 isn't really entirely unprecedented in the CRPG genre. BioWare's Dragon Age Origins previously attempted a similar strategy, integrating cinematic elements into its narrative structure. The game set an early example of how CRPGs could benefit from a more visual storytelling approach, enhancing emotional engagement and narrative pacing. Another comparison we can make is with Persona 5, which led the series to mainstream success partially due to its visually striking presentation, while keeping core themes and gameplay elements from earlier entries. Similarly, Baldur's Gate 3 has captured a wider audience beyond traditional CRPG players through its cinematic approach, proving that visual presentation can be a critical factor in a game's mainstream appeal. The second point is the streamlined RPG experience offered by the game. CRPGs typically throw a lot of micromanagement around character creation, progression, abilities assignment, and inventory control, reflecting their roots in tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. However, Baldur's Gate 3 made strides in this area, though I understand this might be a point of contention for experienced CRPG players and hardcore D&D fans who likely prefer something more intricate, like the Pathfinder games. But for this JRPG guy, and I'm sure for many people out there who joined the Baldur's Gate 3 hype, the process of character creation and progression seemed less detailed than in the first 2 Baldur's Gate games or even the Divinity Original Sin series. I found such a micromanagement component a bit daunting in other CRPGs I tried in the past, as it usually involves numerous steps and decisions about classes, races, abilities, alignments, and more, without much guidance for newcomers on the practical effects of different skills and abilities. Baldur's Gate 3, while still offering depth and customization, guides players more effectively through each step and requires less planning and micromanagement compared to other CRPGs. The game provides clearer explanations and visual aids, making it easier for newcomers to understand the impact of their choices. This approach makes the character creation process less intimidating and more accessible to a broader audience. All of this naturally comes wrapped in a better UI than earlier games in the series and even some more modern CRPGs, such as Pillars of Eternity and again the Divinity Original Sin series. Moving on to turn-based combat, which is a significant component of the game. Unlike the real-time with pause combat of the earlier Baldur's Gate games, the third game employs a turn-based combat system. This aligns closely with the turn-based nature of tabletop D&D, where each character takes turns to make their moves and actions, which is cool for someone who likes turn-based combat as much as I do. Each turn, characters have a limited number of action points and movement range to spend. This system requires players to think strategically about how to use their limited resources each turn. On the surface, it plays very similarly to both Divinity Original Sin games from developer Larian Studios, but I personally felt the combat in Baldur's Gate to be better balanced, as I was able to complete this game on medium difficulty, whereas in Divinity Original Sin 2, playing the same difficulty level, I kept having my ass handed to me by enemies repeatedly. Changing it to easier mode simply removed all the challenge from the game. I couldn't really find a sweet spot. Similar to what I mentioned in the previous point, I get that some more veteran players might miss some aspects of combat in Divinity Original Sin, since these games require more meticulous preparation and strategy before approaching each combat. Its complex environmental interactions and the need for tactical synergy between abilities demand a deeper understanding of the game's mechanics. Baldur's Gate 3 also does away with stuff such as magical and physical armors and weapon durability, further simplifying combat compared to Larian's previous work. But it still worked really well for me. Now, comparing the turn-based combat in Baldur's Gate 3 to JRPGs, it becomes evident why I think this is a breath of fresh air. First and foremost, although combat without scenario transition is not unheard of in JRPGs, it's by no means a standard in the subgenre. The same goes for incorporating positioning as a strategic component in battles. With Baldur's Gate 3, however, we have a mix of both that is quite unique from a JRPG perspective. The closest combat examples I can think of would come from strategy RPGs such as Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics, or even from the long-standing Trails series. In all these games, effective positioning can maximize offensive capabilities, minimize exposure to enemy attacks, and eventually, but not always, exploit environmental factors. Players must think critically about where to place their characters in relation to enemies, allies, and the terrain itself. This emphasis on spatial strategy adds something special to the combat system of these games, making them particularly engaging, and Baldur's Gate 3 does all of this really well. Next, we have story and narrative, which is considered by many a strength of the game. Without getting into much details, not to spoil anything for those who haven't finished the game, I honestly think the story is okay, nothing remarkable, just your standard medieval fantasy, D&D inspired save the world from evil type of tale. Now, the way the story is told is really remarkable. The initial stages of the game are designed to gradually immerse players into the setting, characters, and overarching conflict, and then the way the game ties together loose ends towards the climax is commendable. The narrative cohesion ensures that the story progresses logically and builds up to a significant, world-impacting finale. The game's world building is a standout feature, the lore is deep and immersive, creating a believable and intricate universe. And each character the player encounters is well-rounded with distinct personalities, backgrounds, and motivations. This depth allows for meaningful interactions and relationships, enhances the player emotional investment in the story. Some of my favorite moments are actually those spent doing side missions and helping companions, since those quests offer a more personal and relatable touch than simply fighting an evil force. The writing itself is pretty okay, nothing at the Witcher 3 level, for example, but certainly boosted by overall great voice acting. Last but not least, I'm honestly somewhat on the fence about the game's dice rolling system. Baldur's Gate 3 introduces a distinctive gameplay element that sets itself apart in the realm of modern RPGs, which is a visible dice roll system reminiscent of traditional D&D sessions. Yes, this definitely evokes nostalgia, reminding players of classic RPG sessions with friends. It's a mechanic that harkens back to the roots of the genre, offering a sense of familiarity and fond memories. However, the reliance on dice rolls introduces a high degree of randomness and luck into the game. Critical moments in the story or combat can hinge on a single dice roll, which can be frustrating for players who prefer skill and strategy to play a more significant role in determining the outcomes. In a narrative-driven game like Baldur's Gate 3, the dice roll system can lead to inconsistent storytelling experiences. Key plot points or character developments might be altered or missed entirely due to the randomness of dice rolls, potentially disrupting the narrative flow and player immersion. And yes, I know this is how it's done in tabletop RPG campaigns. I'm just unsure whether this translates well to video games. Overall, this game is a solid 5 out of 5 for me, definitely deserving of the success it achieved. I'm particularly happy with such accolades for a turn-based RPG in 2023, especially considering that this is also the year in which a mainline Final Fantasy game completely parted ways with the system in favor of a full-on action combat. The fact that Final Fantasy XVI was completely outshined by Baldur's Gate 3 in the gaming community makes me hopeful that Square Enix will not be so quick to discard turn-based combat in the future installments of the series. By the way, is the Final Fantasy skin version of Baldur's Gate 3 also on the top of anyone else's wishlist? Please let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.